Quick disclaimer before the video starts, there will be times when I don't mention Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in this video, but unless I specifically specify otherwise, when I say MVC 3 in the video, I am referring to both the Ultimate and non-Ultimate version, because let's be real, it's the same game, but UMVC 3 just has a remaster. Also, I have not played nor experienced any content from the past games within the MVC series, such as Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, and all their remasters, or if they even had any. I always hear arguments for which is better between 2 and 3, but mainly, in this video, we'll be praising Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and comparing it to the latest game in the franchise, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Alright, with all that out of the way, onto the video. It's going to be a long one. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for me, among other games, is a nostalgic experience that I'll go back and play once in a while. As a kid, this was probably the game I played on my PS3 the most, mostly the arcade/offline modes. I completed most of the offline trophies and completed arcade with every character, but I was never good enough to actually compete in the online modes, but I always had fun nonetheless. I played this game for years and did everything again when I got the Ultimate version of the game. So if you couldn't tell, I really loved this game, and I still do to this day. The distinct style of this game is just not present in other installments, specifically Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the fourth and most recent installment to the franchise. When I revisited Mvci and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite a couple days ago, I couldn't help but be extremely disappointed. While it's still a fun game, the gameplay and combos are just a shameless ripoff of MVC 3 with a lack of style. So, I decided to boot up the PS3 for the first time in a while, and I played both MVC 3 and UMVC 3 for a couple hours each. Also, this isn't even in the script, but I just have to say this. I bought Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 on my PS5 because it was $10. I couldn't resist. So originally this video was going to have Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite gameplay, but I did it. I spent the money and I got Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 on my PS5/whatever, 4 version, whatever. It was $10. I couldn't resist, so now I get to play it again and redo everything, and I'm so excited. So instead of, I was planning on doing MVCI kind of gameplay in the background, but you'll be seeing UMVC 3 gameplay that I recorded at 1 a.m. one night, and I was getting really mad, but you can't hear my raging. Alright, so now, onto the video. So what makes Marvel vs. Capcom 3 so great? I mean, look at it. This game looks great. The timeless art style is so unique, and something other comic book inspired games should have. It feels like you're playing a comic book, if that makes sense. Especially with UMVC 3, the loading screens and character selection screens are a literal comic book. It is pages flipping. For a game based on comic book characters, it's so cool for fans of the genre and characters specifically. These characters have their comic book looks and comic book art styles. The high opacity of the outlines combined with the heavy shading and lack of detail on character models provide for the unrealistic vibe. The game is not meant to look realistic, and it prides itself with that. The game has 3D character models, but decides to stay comic accurate with regular models and costumes. That's where I feel MVCI fails. The characters just don't look good. MVCI aims for the more realistic look for its characters, but just fails. Most models just look goofy and flawed, but MVCI, compared to MVC3, lacks style in all parts of the game. The stages in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 only make the character models look better and feel like it belongs in a world where Marvel and Capcom collide. My favorite map in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 has to be the Daily Bugle, and it's not for reasons that you'd expect. But what I love about this map is the vibrancy and encapsulation of both Marvel and Capcom characters. Though expected by the name, it isn't just a Marvel-inspired map. There are a fair share of Marvel posters and a big Spider-Man balloon, but it also has huge Capcom posters of Ryu and Morgan and a balloon of Beautiful Joe. This map also has NPCs taking pictures of the fight. It gives off the vibe that this is happening in a real public environment. People are watching a historic battle unfold right in front of their eyes. Also, something I love about the maps in this game is how the scenery changes. For example, in the Daily Bugle map, the platform you're fighting on goes up. The background changes, and there's an occasional helicopter that appears in the background to just capture the wild fight. So to keep the appraisal going and make the video a little bit longer, here's a few maps I really like. Bond's Wonderland, Demon Village, Redo, I think that's how you say it, Metro City, City That Never Sleeps, Shadowland, and a Shield Helicarrier. The gameplay in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 isn't anything special, and that's not saying it isn't amazing, because it is. It's really good, but it's not something groundbreaking or different from other games. I mean, it's definitely better than Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite's gameplay. An average online-offline match of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 contains Marvel and Capcom characters beating the crap out of each other 3v3 style. This is much better than Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite's 2v2 style that just lacks. This game allows for insane combos, chaining light and heavy attacks, to changing aerial combos into hyper combos, and my personal favorite, changing crossover combos into which you beat the crap out of your enemy, then switch to another character, and keep the combo going with them. It puts out serious damage, and once the technique is mastered, it's so much fun. The moves, like models of the characters, feel unique and focused around them. Like, for example, if you're playing as Wolverine, you really feel like you're playing as Wolverine. I know that sounds dumb because that's exactly what the game is supposed to do, but I just thought I'd compliment it anyway, because it does its job correctly. Each character has their own playstyle. For example, characters like Iron Man have many range attacks that are more effective at a distance. Characters like Dormammu have mid-range attacks that need perfect timing to be effective. And characters like Wolverine and the Hulk have close-range attacks that increase power when, you guessed it, they are used at lower ranges. I like how most characters have more than one hyper combo that they can use for different situations. And speaking of hyper combos, how could I forget the chaotic crossover combination where your whole team of characters group together and blast the opponent out of the world using their hyper combos together. You'll see in this gameplay that I like to do that a lot, and I love finishing off enemies with the hyper combos because it gets that special hyper combo KO and it just looks so cool on screen. Mvci is outstanding for making a cast of 50 characters all feel unique and different. Oh, and did I mention that there's a form of arcade where you can play as Galactus? It is literally 6 rounds of the Galactus boss battle, but flipped on its head. You control Galactus. It's something so simple yet endearing. I really have nothing to say about it other than it's freaking awesome. I must admit I don't have much experience with online fighting. Not only in these games, but any fighting game. I always played offline mode, specifically the arcade mode. I have been milking every ounce of content from the arcade mode in this game since the game was released. And I'm still having fun with it 10 years later, and that says something. The arcade mode contains 6 normal battles and then finishes it off with the greatest final boss battle of all time. Alright, maybe that was an overstatement, but it's fucking Galactus! What better threat to the universe would make 2 sides join together other than the Devourer of Worlds himself? Depending on who delivers the final blow on Galactus, you'll experience a short story told within a few images and text of how that character goes on in life post being recognized for defeating Galactus. Some people complain about how short or disappointing the endings are, but considering how many characters in the game, I don't think it's that big of a deal. They're treated like fun rewards for completing the arcade mode with that character, which is something Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite lacks. The training mode is good, but it's a training mode, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I mean, what else do you expect from it? The Heroes and Heralds mode in Mvci is kind of lackluster and barely adds anything. You're basically just fighting AI like it's Versus or, you know, arcade with a couple of boosts on each side with these playing cards, and it's just not really that enjoyable. The missions are whatever. I mean, it's not really my thing, but if the missions are your thing, go ahead, have fun. They're pretty challenging, and if you're a really experienced player with combos, I guess it's fun. But for me, it's kind of just there. I don't use it, and I can't get past the 4th challenge for most of them, so that says about that. But if you couldn't tell, the arcade mode in this game was my life for years. It's so fun to play as different characters, fight in different stages, and complete the gallery, and kill Galactus every time. It's still so satisfying. So that whole last segment about gameplay might have just been general fighting game compliments. Because if I'm being honest, I've only ever played a couple fighting games in my lifetime, including this one and a DC Mortal Kombat crossover. And I've never really tried to go competitive or online in any of them. But hey, whatever. This game did it with the gameplay, it did it right. So I can't complain, and I don't really hear many others complaining about it either. There are a couple things that are beloved about this game that I won't be mentioning in this video, and I'm not trying to get super specific, but YouTuber Maximilian Dude has great videos on why this game feels really good. He goes over subjects such as perfect screen shaking and stage design, which is stuff that I kind of really didn't notice, but, you know, he's an overall fighting game fan, so you can trust his input. He also has videos where he compares Mvci, well, Mvci really, to MVCI, which is kind of where the inspiration came from for this video, because, you know, I went on a nostalgia trip a couple days ago. I was watching a bunch of videos that made me turn on the game, and here we are. But, you know, it was just kind of cool to kind of compare the two and see how much better the older game was. So I just went over the two most important parts of how to make a fighting game good: gameplay and art design. And you guessed it, this game nailed both. But there's one thing that always stood out to me in this game, and it's the most subtle thing that really means nothing in the end. But the music for this game is so catchy and well made. So before I get into why the remix of I Wanna Take You For a Ride is the best song ever, I'll briefly talk about the character themes. The character themes aren't just catchy, but they encapsulate the character they represent perfectly. For example, my personal favorite, Iron Man's theme, which if you watch my Shang-Chi review, which you should, it's subtly in the background of it. Iron Man, in all forms of media, is a rich jerk tech guy who loves rock. That basically sums it up, right? And his theme checks off all the boxes. From starting off with a techno beat into a shredding guitar riff, it fits the character very well. And that was just one example. Other personal favorites of mine, such as Spider-Man, Captain America's, and Wolverine, have the same amazing song with connections to its character. The main theme of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and the remix version in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 just scream comic book classic video game action vibes. I couldn't imagine anything else I could jam in the menu to. And of course, the best for last, I Wanna Take You For a Ride. While it didn't originate in this installment of the series, I'd argue it's better than the original, and you could fight me on that. While I was writing this script, I just had the game on, and I had that song on repeat in the character selection menu, and I was not sick of it. The lyrics are, I wanna take you for a ride, but the music is so good, and the singing is so good, that I don't care. I've been talking about the characters a lot, from how well they play, to how good they look, and how the music for each individual character really works. But what about the overall roster of the characters? I'll be talking about Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3's roster, of course, as it's the exact same as MVC3's, but just more. Now, I speak mostly from the Marvel side of things, where I can confidently say the roster is really good. I don't know much about Capcom, but I do know a couple of its characters. It has a bunch of unique characters from each franchise. You got some Avengers, some X-Men, some menacing popular villains, and even some obscure characters like a Sentinel or Rocket Raccoon, whom at the time in 2011 wasn't extremely popular and well known as today after the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. On the Capcom side of things, you have fan favorites like Strider Hiryu, Nemesis, Ryu, and Morgan, who I had a crush on as a kid and kinda still do. But like, can you blame me? The game brings in fan favorites and some unique characters from their franchises, and it does it all really well. Alright, now to compare this masterpiece of a game to the disappointment of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Originally, this video was just supposed to be comparing the two, but I had so much to say about Marvel vs. Capcom 3 that I thought I'd give it its own video. But this video is really damn long, so let's do this quick. Art style easily goes to Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The style in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is timeless and can't be beaten. The attempt at realism in MVCI is a total failure compared to MVC3. And MVCI doesn't necessarily look bad, but lacks any style compared to MVC3. Music also easily goes to MVC3. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite tries to be heroic with every theme for its characters, leaving them all to sound samey and bland. While Marvel vs. Capcom 3, on the other hand, did great with the music, not only in the menus and the remixes, but had perfectly crafted character themes that fit each individual character extremely well. Menus and UI obviously will go to MVC3. MVC3 menus showcase the Marvel and Capcom characters actually fighting, the point of the game, and follows its same style through each screen. MVCI doesn't try at all, and has no cool transitional scenes to prove its worth. Here's a funny one. The announcer guy in MVC3 just seems more happy and like he actually wants to be there. This one's stupid, but I saw it in a YouTube comment. I thought it was pretty funny, because the guy in MVCI is just a less enthusiastic version of the one in MVC3. Gameplay goes to MVC3, of course. And that's only because the Infinity Stones are lackluster in MVCI. The 3 characters performing combos together automatically beats the 2 characters doing nothing together. Also, most of the moves in MVCI are blatant ripoffs of MVC3. There are videos that literally show them side to side, and it's disgraceful we waited all those years just for a worse looking game with the same moves and less characters. It's shameful. Roster goes to Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Not only is the quality of characters better, but more is better. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 blows Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite out of the water with MVC 3's 50 characters with DLC compared to MVCI's 36 characters with DLC. Arcade mode boss goes to MVC 3, no question. I'll let you guys answer this one. Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, or an Ultron Sigma orgy? Okay, ranting aside, I didn't really want to make a rant segment on MVCI. It's really not a bad game, I'll be honest. But it is just a lazy copy of MVC 3 on most concepts. I still enjoy MVCI, but it's nowhere near the level of MVC 3, at least for me. I hope we get a 5th installment in the future that takes more influence from MVC 3 besides just ripping off its character moves. Maybe take some from the art style, or take some from the comic book vibe, anything just to improve on Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Hell, bring Galactus back. I don't think anyone would be mad about that. Alright, so what's the verdict? I'm not going to give this a number score or a letter grade to either of the games, because I don't really understand fighting games technically. I could tell you that Marvel vs. Capcom 3 / Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is better than Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which is ironic because it came out, 8-something years before it? But hell, I just really love Marvel, and that's what made my parents buy me this game in the first place when I was literally 5 years old. We got the game for Marvel, but I grew up to love it over the years, and it really still holds up. Do I recommend it? Of course. I'm going to say yes. I literally just bought it from the PlayStation Store, even though I've been playing this game for 10 years. I basically have the same game twice, and I'm not mad about it. If you love the characters and want to try a good fighting game out, here's the game for you. So like I said before, I had so much to say about this game. The game that made me fall in love with video games. I couldn't make a YouTube channel about my opinion on games, movies, and other nerdy stuff, and not talk about the game that started it all for me. If you watch this video to its fullest, thank you so much. I put a lot of time, thought, and effort into the video, and as of now, I don't even think it will do decent. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed. Later.